We were talking briefly about rail transportation, canals, steamboats, and railroads. We said that goods and people can now move faster and more cheaply during this period. We said that the transportation and the railroads are going to connect rural and urban areas, not just railroads, but canals and other improved roadways, and that was part of Henry Clay's desire to bring the sections of the country with his plan called what? The American system. Good. The telegraph is also going to allow rapid long-distance communication, and I had a short video on this topic on steamboats and railroads that I wanted to play before we move on to the next slide. So let's do that now. Excuse you. You all right, Dylan?
Yeah.
All right.
As the 19th century unfolded, new technological developments like canals, like steamboats that were able to travel upriver as well as downriver, and railroads greatly accelerated the pace of communication, which was important for the economy.
What river do you think would most be affected by the steamboat being able to travel upstream against the current?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. It's going to be absolutely vital. Before the steamboat, travel up the Mississippi could be done, but it was difficult because you were going against the current. Well, now with steam technology, you can travel in both directions on the Mississippi, making trade and commerce much, much easier and much more expanded because of the birth of the steam engine.
Because people who were selling goods and trading goods, and they needed faster forms of information to learn about markets, rapidly shifting markets. So communication was important as transportation in accelerating the economic revolution.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, finish this one up, and talk briefly about changes in agriculture. New farm machinery, like steel plows, are going to replace iron plows. Iron was much heavier, it was much, much more difficult.
I don't have this slideshow. Like, I can't find it.
It's the new one that hasn't come up yet.
No, it's not the new one, it's last week's. If you go to your stream last week, Ava, look for Thursday or Friday from last week.
That's the one I tapped. I don't have it.
Let me share it with you. Does anybody else not have it?
I'm sorry. It's supposed to be on the chapter 8 slideshow, right?
Chapter 8:1.
Yeah, it's not on.
I thought I was wrong.
There you go.
It is.
Is that the one?
I don't have that. What sign are you on? That's them?
I'll reshare. I'll do it real quick.
Oh, you were on slideshow 2. Yeah. On slideshow 1.
Was I? I was on the wrong one?
Yeah.
My bad. All right, so slideshow 1, Ava, you with me?
Yes.
All right, so we finished with the telegraph. All right, and we were talking about the rise of a national economy. Very good, my bad. Let's talk about the Industrial Revolution taking hold. All right, slide number 7. All right, I was on the wrong one, and that whole time I thought I'd lost my mind. So thanks for getting me straight, girls. New inventions and technologies are going to spur industrial growth. Cotton gin is going to be increased, which is going to increase cotton production. Cotton gin, Eli Whitney's invention, is going to be a machine that is literally going to result in the explosion of the cotton industry in the South and result in the explosion, really, of the number of slaves that will be required to process cotton. The cotton gin is significant, Eli Whitney's invention, because it is a tool that will effectively replace the labor of 50 slaves. The cotton gin was a box, quite literally a box, that you put raw cotton in, you'd turn a crank, and there would be little tines or claws inside, and what did the tines do? Who remembers what they did? Took the cotton seeds out. Okay, sharp cotton seeds had to be removed by hand before the cotton gin was invented. The cotton gin will do the work literally. What a slave could typically clean 1 pound of cotton per day. One slave could clean 1 pound of cotton, taking the seeds out. Cleaning cotton means taking the seeds out. The cotton gin can now do the work of 50 slaves. Okay, so it's going to make cotton much more profitable. It's going to result, and here's the unique part about the cotton gin. You would think that a device that does the work of 50 slaves would result in the need for slavery to be reduced. Why does the exact opposite happen? Why does a labor-saving device that does the work of 50 slaves result in an explosion in the number of slaves who will be brought into the South?
Because now they're gonna wanna use that even more to produce even more cotton out.
That's correct. The cotton gin will result in profits that will enable plantation owners and planters to buy more land, and if they buy more land, there's a need. The cotton gin cannot do one part of the process. The cotton gin cannot plant and it cannot harvest cotton. That still has to be done by human beings. So while the cotton gin is a labor-saving device, cotton gin and planters who own slaves are going to now be able to purchase much more land, grow much more tobacco, much more cotton, and the cotton gin is going to be resulting in a proliferation and explosion in the number of slaves. Northern mills and factories are going to rapidly expand due to the growth of the cotton gin. More cotton that is produced in the South means more cotton is going to be shipped north for what? For processing. What's the processing? What are they making largely in northern mills with the cotton that's shipped north, Lizzie? Clothing and fabric, yeah. Drapes, curtains, sheets, clothing. You name it. Anything cloth is made of, textile mills. Steam power is going to replace water power in many industries, and some potential positive and negative effects of industrialization. We're going to look at the effects of industrialization. There's going to be positive and there's going to be negative, and we're going to look at them over the course of the next few classes. Let's take a look at our next slide and talk briefly about agricultural advancements. John Deere's steel plow. John Deere's steel plow is going to revolutionize farming. I mentioned earlier, a moment ago, that the steel plow will replace the iron plow. The iron plow is very, very heavy, and it was difficult to maneuver. Steel plow is going to be much more lightweight. McCormick's mechanical reaper is going to increase efficiency, and I'm going to throw in for the local flavor here that the Walter A. Wood Mowing and Reaping Company is actually going to produce a mechanical reaper that is on par with the McCormick reaper, not nearly as publicized as McCormick's and John Deere's farm equipment, but for a long time in the late 19th century, the Walter A. Wood Company from Hoosick Falls was one of the largest agricultural products producers in the world. And the Walter A. Wood Company actually made a mechanical reaper. A reaper is, who knows what a reaper is? I've got some FFA guys in here, don't I? FFA guys or girls? What's a reaper do? Anybody know? A reaper basically cuts down grain and hay, and it bales it. It not only cuts it, but it kind of bales it, and it gets it ready for market. Okay? Farmers, especially in the West, could now work more land. Farmers could work more land due to agricultural advancements. This increased agricultural productivity and profitability. It's going to make farming much, much more profitable with these labor-saving devices. So agricultural advancements are also going to add to the Industrial Revolution. Think about it. I don't want to go too fast, but we've talked about the growth of industry in the north, and we're talking about the growth of agriculture. So I want you to be able to see what's happening. The United States in the early to mid 1800s is becoming not only a manufacturing and an industrial power, but the United States is also becoming a what? An agricultural power as well, providing food not just for subsistence, not just for people to put on their own table. Farmers are providing food for other Americans, and farmers are providing food for other countries around the world. All right, let's talk about commercial agriculture. Don't know whether we saw this one or not, but I'm going to play it again in the event we haven't. Commercial agriculture.
During the first half of the 19th century, as thousands of Americans continued to migrate westward into the new territories of the West that soon became states themselves, accompanying that migration was the transformation of the American economy. Because of improvements such as canals, better roads, and railroads, the American economy shifted from being one that was fairly local and focused on subsistence, that is, farmers growing enough for their own needs, into a national or market economy, whereby improvements in transportation and communication enabled a truly national economy to begin to emerge.
We did see this clip on Friday. We saw the explosion in the railroad mileage up here between 1850 and 1860. And in that 10-year block, what are you seeing happening? 1850 and 1860. What's the story? Just looking at the picture. If green is the amount of railroad track that is laid around the country, what do you see, Katie? What observation can you make between the two?
A lot more railroads.
Yeah, a lot more railroads, especially what region and what section of the country? In the north, okay, in the north.
Where trade was possible across state lines, and where farmers began to produce not just for their own needs, but for sale to others. So a commercial agriculture emerges in conjunction with improvements in transportation and communication. So that by the second half of the 19th century, the United States will become a truly integrated national economy. In fact, the wonder of the world.
Integrated. Farming, industry, manufacturing, and agriculture. It's going to be integrated. And it's that way today. The United States not only feeds Americans, but the United States provides surplus and plenty of agricultural products that feed many parts of the world. And that integration is kind of the hallmark of this period of the Industrial Revolution. America is becoming not just an economic and not just an industrial power, but they are becoming an agricultural power as well during this period. Let's finish up with the next slide. Couple to go before we switch. Here's the downside. There's an upside and a downside. We're going to talk about the growth of cities. And with the growth of cities, there's going to be a pro and a con, as you might imagine. Okay? Industrialization and increased commerce are going to result in quick growth of cities around the nation, but kind of headquartered in the Northeast and in the Middle Atlantic states. By 1860, 16% of Americans, about 1 in 6, are going to live in a city area. Now, before that, it might have been 1 in maybe 20 are going to live in an urban area. Now, about 16% of Americans by the Civil War are going to live in cities. That is a huge sea change from where it was just 20 years earlier. Cities become centers of manufacturing and trade, and new job opportunities are going to exist, but also tons of new challenges. So before we move on, what do you think, based on your reading and based on just general knowledge, what do you think, Haley, are going to be some of the downsides of large numbers of people living in concentrated areas in what are going to be called cities? Plumbing. Yeah, you said plumbing? There's going to be huge problems with waste. How do you provide a mechanism for human waste to safely and to sanitarily be gotten rid of? There was no mechanism in place to deal with that. And quite literally, as you mentioned it, Haley, quite literally, before indoor plumbing, if you were living in a city and you were walking on a sidewalk or you were walking on a street outside of a building like the one pictured here, chances are in the morning, if you were walking early enough, you would have to be wary of what might be dropping down on you from one of those windows above, because people got rid of their waste whenever and wherever they could. There was, and which is going to result in sanitary issues. It's going to result in the spread of disease. So there's going to have to be a mechanism to address that. When you've got large people living in a concentrated area, you're going to have to solve the waste problem. What else? Palin. Yeah, people that lived in rural areas are going to be used to having more space to spread out, more privacy. Now, living in cities, in buildings like this, privacy, space are going to be much more limited, as is a lot of your business. Your business and your personal life is going to be probably much, much more, especially in a city, you're not going to have nearly as much privacy as you might have living in a rural area. So that's going to have to be something that people get used to. Also, what else? City life compared to rural life. Pollution, yeah. Streets are going to be cesspools of human waste, of animal waste, of food waste, of garbage. All those things are going to have to be addressed by municipalities, by towns, by governments. Palin.
I said, the prices are a lot higher, like in the cities.
Prices for what items?
Like food or living
Cost of living might be higher just because you're living in a building like this. You're paying rent. You're paying for food items that might have to be shipped longer distances. Absolutely. Cost of living might be more expensive depending on where you're at. What is the upside of living in the city? There's certainly downsides, but what are the upsides? Think of the upsides today. Anna, benefits of living in New York or Boston compared to living in Hoosick Falls.
Like jobs,
More job opportunities.
resources, like you don't have to travel as far.
Yeah, recently you don't have to travel as far. You're going to have a lot more to do. How many of you have ever been sitting home on a Friday night in Hoosick Falls? You know what? This really sucks. There's not really a lot to do. Well, if you live in Boston or New York or Philly or LA or Chicago, you got theater, you've got drama, you've got clubs, you've got restaurants. I mean, city life, and this is going to be important, girls and guys, city life is going to be appealing to rural folks because for the first time, people are going to have opportunities to experience things in the city life that maybe they never would have experienced in living on a farm or living in the country, including nightlife. Okay, including nightlife, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about urbanization. But yes, there's going to be upsides living in a city. I have a friend comes up every summer from New York City. He lives in a 50-story high-rise in New York City. And he comes up to my place every summer, and we'll either go to the track or we'll go to the Great Escape. We'll do something, especially when the kids were young. He comes to my house. Now, when he used to come, when I lived in Clifton Park, he would sleep in the back bedroom with his wife, and he'd have his baby in a stroller or in the crib. And about 2 in the morning, never failed. Every weekend he came up to my house about 2 in the morning. I'd hear noise downstairs, and he'd be in the kitchen getting a snack or getting a drink or something. And next morning I'd say, why were you up? And he was very honest. What was his complaint? Why was he up at 2 o'clock in the morning? Too quiet. They're used to much more noise and commotion, and it's a busier way of life, and people that are used to that accept it and understand it and live with it. Me, on the flip side, when I'm down at his place, I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning or whenever because I can't stand the noise. It's nonstop. So city life is going to offer changes and challenges. There's going to be upsides and downsides to city life for people who, and a large number of the people that are moving, we're going to find out when we talk about the growth of industry, a large number of people who are going to come from farms to cities are going to be young women who are going to be away from home for the first time, and the allure or the excitement of city life is going to be quite a wonderful and a new experience for young women who are used to life on a farm who are used to life being determined by the crowing of a rooster in the morning when it's time to get up, or the idea of going to bed on the farm when the sun sets because there's no electric light. Now, as we get into city life, we're going to see nightlife is going to be much more part of people's rituals than it would be in rural areas. Nightlife, and then when electric light hits, when electricity strikes, and Edison's light bulb revolutionizes things, then you're really going to see nightlife take off in American cities. So, growth of cities. By the way, that word to describe the growth of cities, moving from rural areas to city areas, is going to be called what? Does anybody know what that term is called? Urbanization. Very good. Urbanization. The growth of people moving from the rural areas to the city is urbanization. Good. Urbanization. All right, next slide, please. Let's do this. The dark side of progress. And you talked about this, a couple of you. Long hours and low wages for many factory workers. Factory life is not easy. It's long hours, low wages, okay, and dangerous. Unhealthy and sometimes dangerous working conditions in city life. Okay, we'll talk more about it in our next slide. Women and children often are exploited in the workforce. Children and women made up the bulk of employees in factories because women and children could be paid less than a man for the comparable job. So women and children typically are going to be the workers in these factories, and they will be paid less, and long hours, low wages, and dangerous working conditions are going to make it very dangerous for people working in these factories and in these mills. Increased reliance on slavery in the South, the dark side of progress. I want you to see cause and effect here. The dark side of progress is going to result in an increased reliance on slavery. The South, with the cotton gin, is going to produce more cotton, and it's going to sell that cotton to northern factories. Northern factories are profiting hand over fist on this cotton that is being sent north for processing. And even though northern states have not allowed slavery for a long time, in the middle of the 19th century, Northerners are still profiting off of slave what? Slave labor. Slave labor. Northerners are profiting off of slave labor. That's the dark side of progress. And we're going to talk more about factory life as well. That's not the end of it, but this is kind of a brief overview on that. When we get into topic 2, the second slideshow in a moment, we'll spend a little bit more time on that as well. Let's wrap up this slide with slide 11 and talk about the transformation of the landscape. Transportation and communication is going to reshape America. Transportation and communication is going to reshape America. Economy becomes more interconnected and complex. It's no longer just industry. It's no longer just agriculture. It's no longer one or the other. It's now both. It's now both. And both opportunities and challenges are going to emerge. Both opportunities and challenges are going to emerge with the growth of cities and the growth of industry and the growth of commercial agriculture. And can you draw parallels between these 19th century changes and changes happening today? What are we enduring today? I'll just ask you this question before we go to the next slideshow. Think about our culture today and our economy. What are we experiencing today that might be somewhat similar to the growth of cities and the growth of commercial agriculture in the 19th century? Are there any comparisons that you can make, that you can think of? What has made business much easier today than
Online resources?
What?
Selling online.
Yeah, online resources, online marketplaces, Amazon. Anything you want to buy, and I mean anything, you can find on Amazon. If you wanted to, and I know people that do this, I know people that will swear up and down they don't want to go anywhere near the mall during Christmas season. All their shopping is done on Amazon, They have everything shipped to their houses, and they have their Christmas shopping done in August. Because you can buy stuff online. Now think about how that changes though how Americans live. Who does that affect? It's easier for me, the customer, to buy online than to go shopping, but who does that have an impact on, Palin?
The stores selling it.
How about the stores with brick and mortar who have employees to ring up your stuff, or people in the aisles to help you find things, or people to stock shelves? All those jobs have gone by, a lot of places gone by the wayside. When I was young, when I was your age, there were probably 30 or 40 major retailers. How many of you ever heard of Sears? Macy's, Kmart, okay? Woolworth, Grant's. There was dozens of retailers where you could go and shop. And now, most of those stores have been replaced with what are called the big box stores, like Walmart or Amazon or some of the Home Depot or Lowe's. But small businesses, family-owned businesses and communities have kind of gone by the wayside due to the way that Americans shop. That's a good one. Shopping, how we buy our goods is a good example. I look at how we get our information, how we get our news has changed too. When I was a youngster growing up, we got our news from literally 3 channels, 6, 10, and 13. There was local news on channel 6, local news on channel 10, local news on channel 13. Now, in our economy, with cable TV and with hundreds of channels and streaming and computers and Roku, and you can get news from any myriad of places, not just 3 news channels. That's another example of how there have been power. The way we live today is much more different than it was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I credit a lot of it with the cell phones, with especially the iPhones and the what's their competitor? iPhone's major competitor.
Android?
The Androids, yeah. I credit those types of devices with really revolutionizing how people shop. All right, let's open up packet 2, if you would, please. Open up packet 2 that I shared with you, and I'd like to at least start this today. The impact of industrial development on work and life. Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of this, and we're going to talk about how workers and communities would be impacted by industrial development. We've talked a little bit about it the first 15, 20 minutes of class today. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about how this is all going to have an impact on people's lives and people's work. People's lives and people's work. I hinted at it a moment ago. If you lived on a farm, Liz, how would you know when to get up?
Rooster.
What?
So the rooster.
A rooster, you might hear the rooster crow. Or if you didn't have a rooster, you'd probably get up with the sun, depending on the time of year. Or if you lived on a farm, you got up when you heard the animals, cows, whatever, when it was time to get the animals fed, or it was time to get the cows milked. City life is going to become ruled by what? How are people's days going to be organized once they move to cities in large numbers? Is it going to be rooster, the cock crowing in the morning and getting up that way, or is it going to be another way? How, Katie?
Electricity.
Okay, before electricity. How's your workday going to start? How are people going to know when the workday starts and when the workday ends?
Clock.
Okay, a clock, and what's going to go off that's going to tell you when your shift starts? A bell, a work bell, like a whistle, to tell you when the workday starts. There'll be a whistle at 11:30 or 12 when it's time to what? Take your lunch. And there'll be a whistle at 5 or 6 when it's time to leave. People's lives are literally going to start to revolve more and more around a clock and more around being on time. Being on time. The idea of time, the idea that, well, our entire building is focused on being someplace at a particular time. Think about how your day is organized. your day is organized into neat little 41-minute blocks that are punctuated by loud noises in between called what? Bells. You know where to be based on a bell. Okay? Well, city life is going to be like that in a large way. And that's going to be a huge adjustment for people to make who are coming from a rural area and not used to that way of life, not used to that way of needing to be in a particular place at an exact particular moment. So more on that as we continue. All right, let's go to slide number 2. The Industrial Revolution transformed society in the 19th century. We're going to see a shift from agriculture to manufacturing as the economic base. As more people move from farms to cities, we're going to see a shift from Thomas Jefferson's agricultural base to Alexander Hamilton's manufacturing base as the economic base. It's not to say that agriculture is becoming unimportant. It is vital. But we're starting to see a shift in the country's priority from agriculture to manufacturing and industry. New technologies and inventions change how people work and live. We talked a little bit about them a moment ago. We talked about farm implements. We talked about labor-saving devices like the cotton gin, Eli Whitney's cotton gin. We talked about any number of agricultural devices that farmers are going to now use to save labor. And other inventions are going to make working in a city much more attractive and much more possible for people from rural areas. The factory system, quite literally during the Industrial Revolution, is basically the taking of large numbers of people, and putting them in a building where they are going to manufacture large numbers of goods, okay, all under one what? People and manufacturing equipment all under one roof, where before the Industrial Revolution, where was most manufacturing? Where did most manufacturing take place before the Industrial Revolution? Kate, Lizzie? At home, maybe in a barn, maybe at the kitchen table, and you made small amounts of things. You made very few of something. Like if you were, for example, if you made rifles, or if you made locks. Better example, locks. If you made locks before the Industrial Revolution, LOCKS, locks, like padlocks, you might make 10 a week at your home, or in your shop in your barn, and you would sell locally. Well, now with the Industrial Revolution, we're getting buildings where there's going to be machines that can build locks in large numbers, made by large numbers of people, to sell to people all over the country. That is really what we're going to see with the Industrial Revolution. People and technology all under one roof to allow for mass production, okay? Mass production. Mass production is really going to start to grow. And mass production is going to take place in factories, okay? Mass production will take place in factories. And there you have a picture, kind of fitting. There you have a picture. Now, that's not factory work. Those are probably miners, okay? Miners and miners, M-I-N-O-R-S. They're young people, and they're probably working in some type of mining operation, maybe coal. But yes, children would be a labor source as well during this period. New technologies and inventions are going to change how people work and live. We'll explore the major impacts on labor, on cities, and on daily life. That's what we're going to be looking at in this section. We're going to talk about how the Industrial Revolution is going to directly impact labor, cities, and people's daily lives. All right, let's go to the video on this topic. The Industrial Revolution.
Over the course of the 19th century, both in Europe and in the United States, what was called an industrial revolution occurred. Imagine, if you will, early in the 19th century, say 1800, over 90% of Americans lived on farms. That began to change in the early 19th century as the first textile mills and shoe factories and mines began to be developed in the United States. Initially in New England and then spreading from north, eventually all the way across the nation, this industrial revolution not only transformed the economy and generated great prosperity and made America more independent from Europe, but it also changed the daily experience of people working. For example, the young women who were hired by the textile mills of New England in the early 19th century had a very different cultural network than was the case with people living on farms and living according to nature's clock. Now they worked according to a whistle or a foreman or a manager who told them when to get up, when to go to work, when to finish, and how much time they might have for lunch. The transformation of the American economy brought great profits and great prosperity, but it also was a jarring change in the daily experience of American workers.
How does America's economic success in this period, how does America's industrial strength and agriculture, how does it make it less dependent on Europe? Author mentioned it. How does it, why is that happening? Why are we less dependent on Europe as a result of the Industrial Revolution? Americans are making their own products and they're selling their own products, and America is basically, we haven't stopped importing, but a lot of the things that we imported from Europe before the Industrial Revolution, Americans are making now on their own. Americans are making on their own. So the dependence on Europe is diminishing. It's not eliminated, okay? It's not eliminated, but it's diminishing because Americans are running their own factories, all right? Americans are kind of doing their own thing. All right, we'll get one more slide in here really quick before the bell. New working conditions. We're going to see a shift from home-based work to factories. Home-based to factories. Huge mindset change for American workers. Working at home, at your own pace, no whistles, no clocks. It gets done when it gets done. Yeah, you had to do things every day. Yes, you had to have all the things done you need to get done, but you're working in a much different environment than you will be working in a factory. Also, long hours, dangerous conditions, low wages are common in the city. Long hours, low wages, dangerous conditions. Those are three biggies, and we're going to see the growth of Watt that will address each of those. Low wages, long hours, and poor working conditions. We're going to see the emergence of Watt to protect workers, labor unions.